My name is Varric Calder. I'm 34 years old. And I need you person portrait. I need you to understand something before I tell you any of this. I am not a dramatic person. I don't make scenes. I don't walk out of rooms for effect. In 11 years of running a family business, I never once raised my voice during a difficult conversation. So when I tell you that I sat across from my parents on a Thursday night and listened to them explain why I needed to forgive my brother for sleeping with my fiancée for 14 months, in 3 cities, on the company credit card, and then I said exactly one word, just one, I need you to understand that the word cost everything it sounded like it didn't cost. I said, understood. My mother smiled a little. Like that was progress. Like we'd landed somewhere important. My brother Darian was on the couch across from me, and he nodded once slow, measured, like a man who'd just been told a minor infraction was going to be overlooked. My father sat with his hands folded and said something about how family stays together when things get difficult. I picked up my keys from the coffee table. I said goodnight. I walked out. They called it keeping the family together. I called it the last thing they would ever ask me to do. By the time the sun came up, I was already gone. What none of them understood, and what I am going to take my time explaining, is that understood was not the beginning of forgiveness. It was the last word of a plan that had already been running for 90 days. They said blood matters more than pride. They were right about that. I just had a different idea of whose blood they meant. I need to go back about 11 years. My father started Calder Family Logistics when I was in my early 20s, and I joined the company at 23. Not because it was handed to me. Because I showed up early and built something inside it. By the time I was 34, I was running the entire operation, supply chain, all vendor relationships, client contracts, the internal systems, the books, the filing schedules, every process that kept the company moving. Our largest account was Gordon Price over at Hartwell Industrial. That relationship alone was worth close to $800,000 a year, and it existed because I had spent 4 years building it personally through late nights, through vendor crises, through the kind of careful attention that doesn't show up on a sales call but shows up everywhere else. My name was not on the ownership documents. Those had always been my father's name, and technically my mother's. But if you had walked into that company and tried to understand how it actually functioned, my fingerprints were on everything inside those ownership documents. The company ran because I ran it. That was a simple fact, the way the weather is a simple fact. And then there was Darian. My brother is 5 years younger than me. He handled sales and client-facing work. He's good in a room. He has the kind of ease that makes people feel like they're in capable hands, like everything is taken care of. That's a real skill. I'm not pretending otherwise. The problem is that it's not the same skill as competence, and in a logistics company, competence is eventually what matters most. In the 5 years before any of this, Darian had cost us 3 client relationships. Not lost clients the way any salesperson loses clients, lost them because of dropped commitments, overpromised timelines, and in one case, a contract he signed without reading the liability clauses that nearly took a key vendor relationship with it. Each time, I cleaned it up. I renegotiated. I rebuilt the trust quietly, without making a production of it, because making a production of it would have hurt Darian. My parents' explanation was always the same: he needs encouragement. He responds better to support than pressure. He's still growing into the role. He was 29. Meanwhile, I was raising my daughter Siri on my own. Her mother left when Siri was 3. I ran full company operations and I raised a child, and I did it without asking anyone for anything. Nobody asked how I managed it. The assumption was simply that I managed it because that's what Varric does. Varric doesn't need anything. Varric's fine. My father liked to say the company was the thing that held our family together. He said it at Sunday dinners and year-end meetings and at Siri's birthday parties when she was small. He said it so often that I stopped hearing it as a statement and started hearing it as a fact about the world. The way you stop hearing traffic if you live near a highway long enough. I should have asked myself much earlier, what would happen if I stopped being the glue? The envelope was in my mailbox on a Tuesday evening in late October. No return address. My name in block letters, printed, clean. Inside were 3 photographs. Isla Thorne, my fiancée, a contract attorney downtown, the woman I had been planning to marry, and my brother Darian. A hotel corridor, both of them in the same frame. His hand placed on the small of her back, her face turned toward him, not away. There was a timestamp printed in the bottom right corner of each photograph. October 14th. I remembered October 14th. Isla and I had dinner that evening. She ordered the salmon. She said she was tired and left early. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The next evening, I drove to Isla's apartment. She opened the door. She looked at me. Then at the photographs in my hand. Her very first question was not "I'm sorry." It was not "let me explain." It was, "Where did you get those?" Not an apology. Not a denial. Where did you get those? I didn't answer. I placed the photographs on her kitchen counter and waited. She crossed her arms. She said it had been going on for a while. She said it wasn't supposed to go this far. She said things had gotten complicated. I asked how long a while was. She said, Varak, I really don't think this is I said, how long? She looked at the photographs. Then she said it again, it wasn't supposed to go this far. That was the second time. I noticed she still hadn't answered the question. 2 days later, I drove to Darian's apartment. He answered the door in a sweatshirt and looked briefly surprised, and then something settled in his expression. A kind of managed ease that told me he had been expecting this conversation and had already decided it wasn't going to cost him much. I held up one of the photographs. He looked at it. He looked at me. Then he shrugged. My brother actually shrugged. Look, he said, you were always at work. She was lonely. These things happen. She was lonely. These things happen. No apology. Not one syllable of one. Just a shrug and 2 sentences, that together implied the whole situation was something the weather had done, not something he had chosen. Repeatedly, for 14 months, in cities outside our own, using windows he had cut from my work schedule. I put the photograph back in my pocket and left without another word. The following Sunday morning, I drove to my parents' house. My father was at the kitchen table in his reading glasses, coffee going cold beside him. My mother stood at the counter. It was one of those ordinary Sunday mornings that feels too settled for anything real to land in it. I told them about the photographs. About Isla. About Darian. My mother set down her coffee cup very slowly, like she was being careful not to break something. My father took off his reading glasses and folded them on the table. And then, after a moment, not a long moment, my father said, if Darian steps back from the sales side, our clients will notice. That was his first sentence. Not, I'm sorry this happened to you. Not, what do you need from us? Not even, I'll talk to him. The first thing out of his mouth was a staffing concern. A business continuity question. As if I had come to him with a scheduling problem, not a betrayal. My mother was crying, but even through that she found her way too. We need to think about what's best for everyone. She said, family comes first, Varak. You know that. It has too. I looked at the two of them and I understood, in a way I hadn't let myself understand before, exactly what the architecture of our family had always been. The company and the family were fused in their minds, the same organism. And Darian, because he was the charm, the handshake, the face clients saw first, was load-bearing in a way that had nothing to do with what he actually contributed. He was going to be protected, not because he deserved it, because removing him felt like a structural risk. I drove home and said nothing. 2 weeks later, they called a formal family meeting. Darian was already there when I arrived. Same couch. This time he wasn't doing the impression of calm, his hands were flat on his thighs and he looked like a man waiting for a verdict he expected to survive. My parents sat across from us both. My father with that deliberate, chin down look he used for announcements. My mother hands folded, posture a degree too straight. The decision was this: Darian needed the family's support right now. He was going through something. Siri needed her grandfather and her uncle in her life. Family ruptures during difficult periods cause lasting harm to children. They were recommending counseling Darian and me, together to repair the relationship. Darian would remain in his position. The family would move forward. Darian said, once, I'm willing to work through this. Not, I was wrong, not, I am sorry for what I took from you. I am willing to work through this, as if the injury were mutual. As if we had both made mistakes in a complicated situation and now needed to find our way back to each other. My father looked at me. My mother looked at me. They both used the word move on more than once, said it with the weight of people who believe they are offering something. Blood matters more than pride, son, my father said. That's what it means to be a family. I looked at Darian. He held my gaze for 2 seconds and then looked at his hands. I said, understood. My mother's face relaxed. She reached over and touched my arm like we had turned a corner together. I picked up my jacket and went home. That night I sat at my kitchen table. The clock on the microwave said 11:42. Siri was asleep down the hall. The apartment was quiet in the way that apartments get quiet when a decision has already been made and all that's left is the work. I opened a blank document on my laptop and I started a list. Every major client. Every vendor. Every contract. Every operational process. Every legal entity in the company structure. I had been managing 9 of the 11 major client relationships personally for years. Every one of those accounts existed because of something I had built. The systems the company ran on were systems I had designed. The institutional knowledge of that business lived in my head. They told me to move on. They didn't say where. I called an attorney the next morning, a firm that had no connection to the family, No shared history, no overlap. I told them what I needed. The 90-day clock started that morning. But before I get to the plan, I need to tell you what I actually found when I sat down and looked properly. Because the 3 photographs in that envelope were not the whole picture. Not even close. When I went through the records carefully, without rushing, pulling cloud backups and expense archives I had legal access to as an officer of the company, I found hotel receipts. 3 cities: Chicago in February, Austin in May, Portland in September. 6 separate stays across 14 months, each one time-stamped, each one with Darian's name on the booking. Not a few weeks. 14 months. And the first hotel receipt was dated 6 days after I had run a 72-hour stretch at the office covering a vendor crisis. Darian had created by signing a contract without reading the liability clauses. 3 days straight rerouting freight, fielding calls, personally reassuring Gordon Price that nothing was going to affect his delivery schedule. 6 days after I got home and finally slept, Darian checked into a Marriott downtown. He knew my schedule. He had built the entire affair around the windows that my work ethic created. I found text message screenshots. Some had been deleted from his phone but not from the cloud backup. One message: Darian to Isla, your fiancé works late every Thursday. I'm at the Marriott downtown. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, now is a very good time. Because it gets worse before it gets better. I could have processed the affair as something between 3 people. A personal wound, ugly, but containable. What I found next was neither. Darian had been filing those hotel stays on the company credit card. Chicago, Austin, Portland, all entered into the quarterly expense reports as client entertainment and vendor meetings. Buried in line items that nobody audited carefully, because for 11 years I had been the person who would have caught fraud, and once I stopped looking for fraud from my brother specifically, there was nothing to catch it. Total amount billed to Calder Family Logistics over 14 months, approximately $11,400. On one of those expense reports, the client entered under client entertainment was Gordon Price, Hartwell Industrial, our largest account. My most carefully maintained relationship. I called Gordon directly. Professional, precise, I told him I'd found reporting irregularities and needed to verify a few dates. He confirmed, none of those dates matched any meeting with him. He was quiet for a moment and then said he was genuinely disgusted. Our office manager Rita had flagged 2 of those filings as unusual in notes on the internal shared drive. No one had followed up. Nobody had thought to look. My brother had stolen $11,400 from the company to fund the affair. He had put a client's name on the invoice's cover. And for 14 months, nobody caught it because I was the person who would have caught it, and I had been too busy running the operation. He was quietly bleeding on the back end with a corporate card. I want to be precise about something. By the time I had assembled the full picture, I was not operating from anger. Anger had passed through me early. It was the first week, when I stood in my kitchen with 3 photographs and couldn't move. What replaced it was something quieter. Colder. More useful. Here is what I had: 11 years of built relationships with 9 of the company's 11 major clients. Vendor agreements either in my name directly or transferable on my authorized signature. Complete institutional knowledge of every system, every process, every filing. And one additional thing: a document my father had signed 18 months prior, when he decided to formalize my authority as the company's authorized representative for all client contracts, vendor agreements, and entity-level filings. He signed it because he trusted me, because he was 65 and tired and I was the one actually running everything. He handed me the key without thinking about what door it opened. I registered a new entity, Northline Logistics LLC. My attorney handled the paperwork. Over the following 3 months, I approached each of the 9 relationships I personally managed transparently, professionally, in proper legal sequence about the transition. Gordon Price was the first to sign. By day 90, 9 of 11 contracts had transferred. All above board. All documented. All supported by the authorization my father had placed in my hands. He always said I was the glue. He never asked what happens when the glue decides to let go. On a Wednesday morning, 3 months after that living room meeting, I went to Lincoln Elementary and met with Principal Mrs. Henderson. I told her I was withdrawing Siri from enrollment. Effective the following week, I said we were relocating. I asked her not to share any forwarding information with anyone who inquired. She looked at me for a moment. She said, "Understood." I almost smiled. The apartment lease had ended on the 15th. I had given proper 30-day notice a month before. The move itself had happened gradually, a few boxes at a time, spread across 2 quiet weeks so that the apartment looked normal right up until the morning it didn't. That evening, I printed everything. The photographs. The hotel receipts from all 3 cities, the text screenshots, including the cloud backup messages Darian thought were gone, the expense reports with each fraudulent entry circled, The restructuring documents showing the 9 contract transfers, each with a client signature. And the authorization paperwork, my father's signature at the bottom stapled to the front. I put all of it in a manila folder. Then I called my parents and Darian from the parking lot outside Siri's former school. I said I needed everyone at the house that night. 9 o'clock. I had something to say. I used a calm voice. I gave no details. I drove home. I picked up the folder. I placed it on the passenger seat. I drove to my parents' house for the last time. Darian was already there when I arrived. Same spot on the same couch, the forgiving couch, the deciding couch. This time there was no impression of ease. His left knee was moving, and he stopped pretending when I came through the door. My parents sat across from him. My father without his reading glasses, which meant he was preparing himself for something. My mother with her hands folded, posture a half-inch too straight. I sat down. I placed the manila folder on the coffee table face down. My mother offered coffee. I said no. My father started, "We're glad you reached out, Varak. We've been hoping we could all sit down and..." I said, quietly, "I'm not here to negotiate." He stopped. No one looked at the folder. No one reached for it. No one asked what was in it. The silence in that room had a specific weight, like everyone had already made a private calculation about what was inside, and had decided not to be the first to find out. I turned it face up. I opened it. The photographs came out first. I set them on the coffee table in a row. No comment. Just photographs. The hotel hallway. His hand. October 14th, time-stamped in the corner of each one. My mother made a small sound. My father looked at Darian once, then back at me. I laid out the hotel receipts in a column beside the photographs. Let them sit. Chicago. Austin. Portland. I said. 6 stays. 14 months. The first receipt is dated 6 days after I worked 72 hours straight, cleaning up a contract he signed without reading. Nobody spoke. I set down the text screenshots. I read one aloud. Flat voice, no emphasis. Your fiancé works late every Thursday. I'm at the Marriott downtown. The room was very still. Then I placed the expense reports. These are the company card filings, I said. Every hotel stay, all 3 cities filed under client entertainment, filed under vendor meetings. Billed to Calder Family Logistics. I pointed to one line item. That entry lists Hartwell Industrial as the client. That's Gordon Price's account, Dad. Darian billed his hotel rooms to Gordon Price's account. $11,400 over 14 months. My father said, quietly, Varak, we can handle this internally. My mother said, these things happen, families go through. I looked at her. She stopped. Because she had just used her youngest son's exact words, the ones he'd shrugged out in a sweatshirt 3 months ago. These things happen. I don't think she realized she'd said it, but I did. You already handled it, I said. You told me to move on. So I did. I laid out the restructuring documents. I told them about North Line Logistics. I explained without raising my voice, without any performance, that over the preceding 90 days I had transferred 9 of the company's 11 major client contracts to a new entity. I said every transfer was documented, every transition handled through proper legal process. And then I placed the last page, the authorization document, my father's signature at the bottom on top of everything else. 18 months ago, I said, you made me the authorized representative for all company contracts, vendor agreements, and entity filings. You both signed it. I held his gaze. I used the authority you gave me. My mother's voice went high. You wouldn't, Varak, you can't have. Darian stood up. Dad, that can't be legal, he can't just. My father picked up the authorization page. He looked at his own signature. He was quiet for a long time. I stood up. I picked up the folder. You said blood matters more than pride, I said. I agree with that completely. My blood is in the car. She's 11 years old and she has school in the morning. Darian said, you can't do this. I looked at him. 4 seconds. I already did, I said. I walked to the door. I said goodnight. I walked out. By the time my parents called the office the next morning, the routing on my company email had already been closed. Rita answered the phone and confirmed she had received notice of my departure and that all transition documents had been filed with the company's legal team. When my father reached Gordon Price, Gordon said his contract had been with North Line Logistics LLC for 3 months. He said everything was properly documented on his end. He said he hoped the family situation got sorted, but that as far as the business relationship was concerned, he was where he needed to be. Darian couldn't run the operational side. He never had the systems, the processes, or the institutional knowledge. Those things had lived inside my work for 11 years, and they had migrated with me to new servers, new filing structures, A new address. My parents couldn't find the processes because they'd never had to look for them. I had always just handled it. The apartment was empty. Siri's room was empty. We were already somewhere else. 6 months later, I mailed a certified letter to my parents' address. One sentence. You told me to move on. I did. By then, Northline Logistics had already exceeded what Calder Family Logistics had ever reached in its best year. 2 years after that, my mother passed away. She was 62. I heard through a distant cousin. I did not go to the service. 3 weeks after my mother's death, a letter arrived at my parents' address from my attorney's office. Not from me, from the firm. It said, Mr. Calder wanted you to know he is aware of your loss. He doesn't hate you. You are simply irrelevant now. My father spent 11 years saying the company held the family together. He said blood matters more than pride. He said family comes first. He chose the son who smiled in client meetings over the son who kept the lights on, and he called it keeping the family together. He did keep it together. Just the two of them, him and Darian, in an office with 2 clients and a lot of empty filing space where everything I'd built used to be. They said family comes first. They were right about that. Mine does.